house you saw upon arrival is actually the second Breakers. The original house was built for the tobacco magnate Peter Lorillard by the Boston firm Peabody and Stearns in 1879. This shingle-style masterpiece, with its porches, towers, and a profusion of Victorian detail, was made entirely of wood. Eventually, the Lorillards left Newport to develop the millionaires' community of Tuxedo Park in New York State, and Cornelius Vanderbilt II, Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt's eldest grandson, purchased the property in 1885. The Vanderbilts spent many summers in the first house, until it was destroyed by a fire caused by a boiler explosion on the day after Thanksgiving in 1892. Vanderbilt decided to rebuild immediately. Richard Morris Hunt had already produced Marble House for his younger brother Willie Kay, and was working on the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina, for the youngest Vanderbilt brother, George. Cornelius had no specific style in mind, he just wanted his new house fireproof. Hunt and his office presented two options. The first was a picturesque French Renaissance chateau, and the second was a more classical North Italian or Genoese palazzo. The palazzo won out as the Vanderbilt's neighbors on Overpoint Avenue, the Golettes, already had a chateau by Hunt. From clearing the site in the spring of 1893 to the grand opening in August 1895, the Vanderbilts and Hunt managed to build, landscape, and furnish the largest of all the Newport cottages in just about 2 years. By collaborating closely with almost 30 contractors from Newport, Boston, New York, and Paris, and by employing approximately 200 men on site and countless others in workshops and studios, the house went up incredibly quickly. Hunt relied on experts to guide the technical aspects of his houses. With the help of trusted contractors, the Breakers had state-of-the-art systems so that the Vanderbilts could
If you guys want to follow me, we're going to head towards the tunnel that leads us to the main So, the architect of the main house, the Breakers, was a guy named Richard Morris Hunt. And what he did when he constructed the Breakers, when the construction began in 1893, he hired a photographer to document the construction of the house as it goes from sort of base foundation structure up to the property that you know today. So we're going to take a look at a couple photos as we head down. This is a couple months into production in 1893. All of these houses, these Gilded Age mansions, are at their heart kind of the same. You'll notice the brick and steel structure, and that's underlaid by a sort of exterior shell of some kind of higher value material, in this case Indiana limestone. And that's what the exterior of the Breakers is made from. But at their core, they're really all the same structure. It's just a simple brick and mortar house. You can see here the original brick structure. This is what's left of the original Breakers that burned in 1892. The only thing that was left was the chimneys and the foundation, which they built on the foundation that still remains. These are the chimneys that they've taken down and are going to replace. You'll also notice in the foreground here, horse and buggy. This is 1893. We don't have U-Haul trucks. We don't have power tools. We don't have anything like that. All of these cranes would have been hand tooled by workers. And so even though the Vanderbilts had the largest shipping empire in the world, they could ship things into Newport Harbor fairly easily by rail, by boat. They still had to carry everything up to Overpoint Avenue by hand. And so that was how all of the materials got on site. So you can imagine the workforce that would have been necessary for something like that. Here we are, April 1894, so a little over a year into construction. You can see that Indiana limestone has come up to the second floor here. You can still see that brick structure underlying everything, right? You can see the porte cochere has gone up. This is the front entrance of the house where you'd enter. This is where carriages and carts would pull through to let the family out, to let guests out. You'll notice here the foreman standing right in the, what would be the music room eventually. They had around 200 laborers at any given time on site. Most of them are second generation Irish immigrants who moved here from the construction of Fort Adams in the 1830s. So a lot of them settled here in Newport. They had children, and a lot of those children worked on this site here. They also had around 30 artisans. It was a team that was assembled by the architect, Richard Morris Hunt, and he assembled this team to do anything that was a little more complex. So stuff like stonework, advanced woodwork, electrical systems, wiring. A lot of these artisans were French and Italian. They had an Austrian stonemason. It was a very diverse variety of teammates who worked on the sort of more complex elements. June 1894, so a couple months later, you can see this wooden scaffolding, not metal, wooden, going up to the 4th floor there. See that limestone has come all the way up. This is facing the front of the house, so you can see the porte cochere here with that brick structure underlying it. And I want you to pay close attention here. These brick load-bearing walls up on the top, as well as those steel beams. Those would hold the 39,000 terracotta tiles that would eventually make up the roof. That altogether weighed around 60 tons on its own. And so you need these modern construction, both materials and methods, in order to support all of that weight. You can also see one of the 12 chimneys that would eventually be put on the breakers. That would exhaust all of the, vent everything from all of the fireplaces throughout the house, as well as the kitchen, which would generate a lot of smoke. So that was all coal-fired as well. It's one big coal-fired griddle, basically. You can also see some temporary structures out in the foreground there. That was for all of the workers to plan to live. They had tents and things on site so that workers could live here. You guys want to watch your head coming up and need to be on the road. Not me. Dehumidifier here. June 1894, this is the back of the house from the Atlantic Ocean. You can see the lower and upper loggias here. The brick underlying structure on the roof has gone down. That's where all of those terracotta tiles are going. You can see more of those chimneys have been put up. And the most important thing here is the landscaping that's being done. This is for the back terrace that will face the Atlantic Ocean. Right underneath that back terrace is a series of 8 cisterns. They're about 9,000 gallons each. And when we talk about sources of water in the house, that's going to come into play. Those cisterns would have housed the fresh water for the house. And so those are being buried there. These concrete barrels would be used to overlay the terrace on top of that. And like I said, we'll talk about that. Here we are, October 1894. That scaffolding's come down, that limestone has been polished. Around 300 windows are being put on the exterior. You can see the back terrace has been put in, the balustrades put up. And I want you to pay close attention here, just beneath all of these terracotta tiles that are now on top of the roof. This little white line that breaks along the corners. Anyone tell me what that might be?
What was that again?
Exactly, yep, it was a gutter system. So this is actually an internal gutter system. It ran along the inside of the Indiana limestone. And all of that water that was collected from that gutter would go down underneath the terrace and collect in those cisterns. That was one of the sources of fresh water for the house. They decided to collect rainwater. So it was this whole cyclical system that allowed that to be collected.
About the rainwater would those systems ever fill up because if they're full and you got more rainwater coming in the gutters, then what?
They had a drainage system. They would basically drain anything that came, the overflow of the cisterns into the Atlantic Ocean. They had a big pipe that went all the way down, basically where the footwalk is today, and that would just drain any excess off of that. But here we can see May 1895. The exterior of the house is pretty much done at this point. All the scaffolding's gone, all of the exterior is finished, the windows are in. The only thing that's really left to do is landscaping, so planting trees and bushes, as well as interior decoration. When Alice Vanderbilt, the wife of Cornelius, arrives in August of 1895, everything needs to be done. She doesn't want to go furniture shopping, she doesn't want to interior decorate, everything needs to be finished. Oh, your name's Alice. Oh my gosh. So you're connected, maybe you're related.
I wish.
Alright, here we are, just before August 1895. You can see this is facing the front of the house where you guys came in. The landscaping has been done, all of the trees have been planted. The interior is done at this point. There's a guy named Jules Allard did all the first floor. A guy named Ogden Codman does all the second and above. So they've come through and done all of the furniture, they've designed all of it. You can see the caretaker's cottage where I met you guys today, right at the front door. At this point, in August 1895, when Alice arrives to her new Newport mansion, she hosts what's called a midnight ball. I'll give you one guess as to when that took place. This was both a housewarming party and a debutante ball for her daughter Gertrude, for her introduction to society. And at that point, they had entered Newport. They were full-fledged Newport members, Newporters, and they opened the breakers for summer living. I will note, actually, there's one thing missing from this photograph, and we're actually still missing it today. Right up front, can you tell me?
Gate.
Exactly, the gate. That would come the year after, 1896, and then the fence that surrounds the property would come the year after that, 1897. Other than that, everything is basically as you see it today. Here's that other fire door I was talking about. We're actually underneath the main property now. We're right where they scan your tickets for the main house. So we traveled 360 feet all the way from the boiler room, basically right underneath that gravel driveway. That's what that tunnel is there. So yeah, now we're underneath. On my left here is the office of Lawrence Bauer Band. As you saw in the video, and as I mentioned, he was the chief engineer of the breakers from 1916 to 1917. He went to the fight in World War I in 1917. Did survive World War I. Part of the gas attack in France that actually killed most of his platoon, but he was one of the few to survive. After that, he did not return to the breakers. He went to work on a hotel in New York, and from what we understand, he became quite successful in that. He was responsible for managing all of the systems here. He was kind of an overseer. Electrical panel. The back is made of pink Tennessee marble. The fixtures are all copper. It was all put in by a company named Hatzell and Bueller. They incorporated from the Edison Company in 1884, and they're actually still around today. They're one of the largest electrical contractors still around. They are responsible for doing all the electrical work at Epcot Center in Disney. They did all the electrical work in the original World Trade Center as well. They've actually come to tour to take a look at this panel as part of like a professional development thing, which is pretty cool. And this panel was actually still in use up until 1990. That was until our caretaker at the time, during a fundraising event that was going on at the breakers, he came down to investigate the electrical system, and he discovered that all of the fixtures on the Tennessee marble here were blowing red hot. So at that point, they figured probably best to replace that, but until then, everything was still running through this.
Yeah, because now you've got the fire.
So you'll notice here on my right, this sort of rough hewn stone structure here at the foundation. And then on my left, you can see it looks closer to like a brick structure, right? These are actually the original foundation of the breakers, the one that burned in 1892, and the new foundation that was put up in 1893. They utilized both because they still remained after the fire. But you can see they both utilize the same arch structure above the doors here, as well as on the roof. It's what's called barrel vaulted ceiling, right? It's almost like rippled with these steel beams in between. And this was a structural integrity measure. With these new materials that came about in the late 19th century, things like brick, things like steel, things like iron, they were able to implement them across the house in order to carry all of the weight of the materials. And all of the weight of those materials acting on the foundation is what's called a dead load. And that's things like the 60-ton roof I was talking about. That's the 1.5 ton bathtubs. That's all of that limestone, brick, steel, everything just weighing on top of that foundation. But in addition to that, the house also needs to carry its own life load. And that's things like you and I, when we visit on 4th of July and on Christmas. That's things like rain and snow and wind and seismic activity. The house needs to be able to handle all of that. And so these new construction materials afforded them the ability to build this grand house without worrying about those factors sort of having an impact on the structural integrity of the house. You can see 2 of those roof tiles there that I was talking about. Those 30.
Wow, a lot of bricks down here.
Terracotta roof tiles. Those are the ones that would have originally been on the roof. You can see here some structures around the late 19th century that utilized that arch structure, as well as the barrel vaulted ceiling. Crystal Palace in London, Eiffel Tower in France, Brooklyn Bridge, Brooklyn. You can also see here, this is one of those radiators that I've been talking about behind the walls. So in addition to carrying the weight of all those materials, you also need to put things in the walls. You need to put wiring and plumbing and these radiators. And so it's kind of this impressive feat that all of this came together, and it's because of these modern, new innovative materials that allow that to happen. And if we head this way, we can talk a little bit about water. So the house, when it was built, had 3 sources of water. Ernest Bowditch, who was the chief landscaper when the house was built, he was also a... Right, yeah, I'm sure it's super efficient there. I mean, I want to make it up there, but I know this, all that geothermal activity is gorgeous. But yeah. Anyway, we've been talking about these mixing boxes here, these radiators are. I'm actually not done talking about these. Right in these radiator chambers with the big vent that goes all the way up, right underneath the radiator, there's actually a hole. It's about yay big, and that connects to, right underneath our feet, a sub-basement. And it's about that high, and it's filled with cold air. Follow me this way. You put your hand right in here. It's a warm day, so I might not use that, but on a cold winter day, it's, you can feel it. Right now, we're right underneath the music room, right underneath the pianos, right? And this is the exterior of the house. And on the outside of the house, there are these ventilation ports. And they allow cold air to come in from outside. And when it does, cold air sinks, remember? It drops down, and right underneath there is that sub-basement. And all of that cold air flows all the way through beneath our feet. We've been walking over it this whole time. And those holes that are right underneath the radiators, as that warm air rises up to the rest of the house, it creates a vacuum behind it. And that cold air from underneath gets sucked up all the way around. So that cold air comes up, gets heated by the radiator, goes up to the rest of the house. And that completes the cycle. That's how that sort of passive system that worked on no fans, no electricity, that's how Richard Morrison designed it. And he designed it specifically for this house. A couple weeks ago, I actually had some New York City subway engineers who came on my tour with two guys, and they said, we work with all this 19th century tech. This is exactly how we do it there too. It was the Vanderbilts who designed and engineered the New York City subway system, so that makes sense that they implemented this same design there. It's pretty cool. But it was this ingenious passive system. It required no additional input other than physics, basically. Which is pretty amazing. Right here, Past the music room here is the back terrace that we've been talking about. Right beyond this wall is those cisterns that I was talking about that collected the fresh rainwater. And then beyond that is the Atlantic Ocean. Right on the seawall there, where the cliff walk is today, that's where they would have pumped the salt water in. They had a pumping station right on the exterior of the property. These wooden beams here, these are the original beams that were put in as part of the terrace, the back terrace. And they're these 130-year-old oak beams. They're still sturdy. We put them in, and they've survived this whole time, which is pretty impressive.